Story 1. Göbekli Tepe's buried twin, Turkey. The discovery did not make headlines. It wasn't supposed to. In the mid-1990s, as Klaus Schmidt's team surveyed the limestone ridges near Göbekli Tepe, their instruments flagged a second anomaly roughly 300 meters east of the main enclosure. Same elevation, same subsurface density, same unmistakable geometry. A mound long dismissed as natural bedrock showed right angles where none should exist. The team logged it as a secondary site and marked it for future excavation. Then the scans disagreed. The stone wasn't random. The hill wasn't a hill. Ground-penetrating radar and resistivity surveys revealed stacked circular forms beneath the surface, pillar-like voids arranged in patterns already familiar from Göbekli Tepe itself. Field notes describe T-shaped reflections at consistent depths. Photographs exist. They were taken before excavation began. Schmidt referenced the anomaly once in a closed workshop, calling it related but inaccessible. No trench was opened. No tools touched stone. The data alone was enough to change the mood of the project. Too close, too similar, too old. Within months, Turkish authorities expanded the site's protected boundary. Officially, it was an act of preservation. Unofficially, it ended all discussion of the Eastern Mound. The area was backfilled, leveled, and replanted with native grasses under an agricultural stabilization program. Access roads were rerouted. The coordinates were quietly removed from public-facing survey maps. When a junior geophysicist requested permission to rerun scans, the request was denied without explanation. No appeal, no paperwork, no timeline. The consequence was subtle but permanent. The secondary mound vanished from the literature. Schmidt continued work at the main site, but never published the full survey data from the Eastern Ridge. One member of the original survey team, credited internally for identifying the anomaly, was reassigned to administrative duties and never returned to fieldwork. He missed his daughter's graduation while finalizing transfer reports that would never be cited. When Schmidt died in 2014, his unpublished notes were archived, not released. The silence held. Today, Göbekli Tepe is celebrated as a singular revolution in human history, a lone outlier, an exception, but anomalies rarely travel alone. If a second complex exists, buried, mapped, then deliberately ignored, it suggests planning on a scale that collapses the idea of isolation. It suggests a network, not a miracle. And networks raise questions institutions don't like answering. Secondary mound sealed. Designation upgraded to level 2 cultural security. Story 2. The Silurian layer anomaly, Ukraine. It began as a routine salvage excavation. In 1978, outside the city of Zhytomyr in northern Ukraine, construction crews preparing a reservoir uncovered worked stone beneath a compact clay layer dated to the late Silurian period, more than 400 million years old. That alone should have been impossible. The site was flagged. A small academic team from Kyiv State University was dispatched to document and remove the material before flooding. Then the tools appeared. Wrong layer, wrong age. Embedded beneath fossilized marine deposits were chipped stone implements showing deliberate flaking, not geofacts, not random fractures. Hand tools. The team photographed them in situ, logged their depth, and extracted soil cores for independent dating. One notebook entry, later leaked, underlined the contradiction in red pencil. Stratum 7B, cultural material present. The designation was meant as a placeholder. It became a problem. The layers didn't lie. The timeline did. Within days, the excavation perimeter changed. What had been a civilian project gained uniformed guards. The Ministry of Defense assumed oversight, citing unexploded ordnance risk from World War II. It was a thin excuse. No munitions were ever logged. The archaeologists were instructed to halt removal immediately and rebury the exposed trench for stabilization. Cameras were confiscated. Film was returned weeks later, partially fogged. Soil samples were seized and reassigned to a central archive that did not accept academic inquiries. No signatures, no receipts, no explanations. The lead field archaeologist protested in writing. His appeal never reached the ministry. Instead, he was informed that the reservoir project would proceed ahead of schedule and that further delays constituted economic sabotage. The trench was backfilled under military supervision. Concrete markers were placed not for preservation, but to prevent reopening on updated geological maps. Stratum 7B simply ceased to exist, absorbed into a generalized sediment band with no annotations. The layer was erased. The personal cost followed quietly. The lead archaeologist was removed from teaching duties. The following year, his research funding evaporated. Colleagues stopped returning calls. In 1982, He emigrated with his family, abandoning a 30-year career trajectory. He sold his apartment to pay exit fees. His son never learned Ukrainian history from him again. The anomaly remained unpublished, surviving only in copies of field notes circulated privately among Eastern European geologists. The work ended. The doubt didn't. Officially, the site was preserved from contamination. Unofficially, it had revealed something the existing framework could not absorb. Work stone where no humans were supposed to exist. A single anomalous layer might be dismissed. A labeled one is harder to kill. Stratum 7B became a warning. Passed quietly, referenced cautiously, and never acknowledged in print until it surfaced again. All materials reassigned to sealed defense archive. Civilian access permanently revoked. Story 3. The Giza subterranean shafts, Egypt. The plateau had been surveyed for a century, every tomb mapped, every corridor measured. By the late 1990s, Giza was considered exhausted ground. Then a private engineering firm, contracted to assess bedrock stability near the Sphinx enclosure, ran deep seismic scans beneath the limestone. The results didn't match the maps. Below the known chambers, below the water table, the data showed linear voids, long, narrow shafts cut cleanly through bedrock. Not fractures, not erosion, deliberate channels. The discovery was logged as an infrastructure concern. Engineers flagged the anomalies as potential collapse risks and forwarded the scans to Egypt's Supreme Council of Antiquities. A follow-up survey confirmed at least 3 vertical shafts descending beyond known Old Kingdom construction depths. One appeared to angle toward the Great Pyramid's southern flank. A small robotic probe was approved for inspection. Its descent was brief. The feed cut after 27 minutes. Static. Silence. End of transmission. What footage survived was fragmentary but unsettling. Smooth walls. Tool marks inconsistent with copper chisels. At one point, the camera light passed over a recess. Rectangular, precise, and sealed. The engineer overseeing the descent noted a temperature shift and unexpected airflow. His report recommended expanded access and independent verification. Instead, the file was stamped restricted circulation. The recommendation vanished. Within 48 hours, the site perimeter changed. Egyptian military personnel replaced civilian guards. The engineering firm's contract was terminated for scope violation. Officials cited national security, arguing that subterranean access points pose a terrorism risk. It was a modern explanation applied to an ancient void. Excavation approval was revoked. The shaft entrances, never publicly acknowledged, were filled with slurry and capped with limestone plugs matched to surrounding bedrock. No press release, no public record, no debate. The consequence extended beyond the site. The lead robotics engineer was informed his services were no longer required on heritage projects. His security clearance was downgraded without cause. Invitations to international conferences stopped arriving. He missed his mother's funeral while detained at customs for questioning about unreported technical materials. When he later requested access to the original scan data, he was told it had been corrupted and overwritten during a system upgrade. Nothing remained to contest. Official narratives resumed as if nothing had happened. Giza returned to postcards and tour routes. The Sphinx slept, but among a small circle of geophysicists, the story persisted. Multiple independent scans, using different methods, had identified the same shafts at the same depths. The odds of coincidence were low. The odds of error lower still. Something had been cut into the plateau long before modern restoration, and long before it was supposed to be possible. The stone remembered. The record did not. In archaeology, absence is often explained away. Data gaps become footnotes. But deliberate backfilling is not absence. It is action. At Giza, the choice was not to investigate or ignore. It was to seal. And sealing implies expectation, of pressure, of exposure, of questions that would not stop once asked, especially when the ground answers back. Subsurface access reclassified. Excavation permits revoked under national security statute. Story 4. The Amazon Geoglyph Complex, Brazil. For most of the 20th century, the western Amazon was assumed to be archaeologically empty. Poor soils, nomadic tribes, no large-scale planning. That assumption collapsed in the early 2000s when deforestation exposed vast geometric earthworks in Acre and Rondonia, squares, circles, and octagons carved into ground, some spanning hundreds of meters. The shapes were too precise to be natural. Satellite imagery confirmed hundreds more. The forest had been hiding them. The math could not. Brazilian and international teams rushed to document the sites. Radiocarbon dates place some geoglyphs more than 2,000 years old, implying dense, organized populations previously erased from the historical record. LiDAR revealed connecting roadways and terraces beneath intact canopy. The Amazon was not untouched wilderness. It had been engineered. Field reports used the word urban. That word traveled fast. Too organized, too advanced, too inconvenient. Then the intervention began. Federal authorities announced an emergency conservation initiative, citing erosion risk and looting. Excavation permits were suspended. Sites that had been partially exposed were deliberately reburied using soil and fast-growing vegetation. In several cases, heavy machinery filled trenches before full mapping was completed. Coordinates were redacted from public databases. New satellite imagery was restricted under environmental protection statutes that blocked independent analysis. Protected, stabilized, inaccessible. The official line was preservation. The timing told a different story. Reburial accelerated just as evidence mounted that the geoglyphs represented a civilization-scale alteration of the Amazon, one incompatible with long-standing narratives used in land use policy and indigenous displacement cases. Acknowledging complex urban societies would reopen legal questions about ancestral land rights. History was not the only thing at risk. Ownership was. The human cost surfaced at the margins. Indigenous elders from nearby communities testified that the earthworks were known and named long before satellites saw them. Their accounts were excluded from formal reports. One local guide who led researchers to multiple sites lost his contract when the area was reclassified as restricted forest. He moved his family after receiving threats for attracting outsiders. His children left school mid-year. The forest closed, and again, so did the silence. Today, the Amazon geoglyphs are cited cautiously, framed as isolated ritual spaces rather than integrated systems. Many mapped sites remain unexcavated, sealed beneath new growth. Reburial preserved them physically, but also froze interpretation at a safe distance. The implication that large, planned societies once thrived where none were supposed to was acknowledged just enough to be neutralized. Discovery without consequence. Evidence without permission. The pattern was now unmistakable. When a site threatens modern frameworks, political, legal, or ideological, the response is not destruction. It is burial, clean, reversible, deniable, and increasingly standardized. Over 80 geoglyph sites removed from public registry within 18 months. Story 5. Yanaguni's Restricted Zone, Japan. In 1986, off the coast of Yanaguni Island, a local diver searching for hammerhead sharks descended into clear blue water and found stone where none should be. Rising from the seabed was a massive step formation. Flat terraces, sharp angles, and apparent stairways cut directly into bedrock. It was not buried by time. It was submerged by it. Too straight, too sharp, too intentional. Marine geologist Masaaki Kimura began systematic surveys soon after. Measurements showed right angles, parallel planes, and what appeared to be carved channels and pillars extending over 150 meters. Video footage documented symmetry difficult to attribute to erosion alone. The structure sat at a depth consistent with sea level rise at the end of the last ice age. If artificial, it implied complex construction more than 10,000 years ago, far earlier than Japan's accepted history. The dates collided, the model strained, the debate ignited, then the perimeter changed. What began as open academic inquiry shifted into controlled access. Japanese authorities restricted dive permits, citing diver safety and conservation. Portions of the site were declared off-limits without public explanation. Independent surveys were discouraged. Funding for extended mapping dried up. The most detailed scans remained unpublished. No excavation was ever authorized. Instead, the site was left underwater, preserved by submersion, insulated from decisive testing. No chisels, no cores, no verdict. One skeptic alternative must be stated clearly. The formations could be the result of natural fracturing in sandstone amplified by wave erosion, misread through human pattern recognition. That explanation remains plausible and unresolved. What made Yanaguni different was not disagreement. It was containment. Scientific disputes normally expand data collection. Here, access contracted. The question narrowed. The answer weighted. The consequences fell on the margins. An independent diver who filmed extended sections of the structure lost commercial access after publishing footage online. He was informally blacklisted from charter operators. His dive school closed within a year. He sold his equipment to pay debts and never returned to the site that made his career. He watched from shore. Yanaguni remains in limbo. Official tourism material mentions Natural rock formations. Academic papers hedge carefully. No decisive excavation has ever occurred. Despite decades of debate, the site was not reburied with soil. It was sealed by policy, a submerged anomaly managed through restriction rather than resolution. Neither confirmed nor dismissed. When uncertainty threatens chronology, institutions often choose delay over clarity. Yanaguni demonstrates a quieter method of suppression. Leave the structure where it is, but ensure no one can touch it long enough to prove anything at all. Time becomes a barrier, and time always favors silence. Maritime exclusion radius doubled. Independent survey permits indefinitely suspended. Story 6. The Bosnian Pyramid Backfill, Visoko. In 2005, a hill outside the town of Visoko was reclassified as something else. Not a hill, but a structure. Satellite imagery, slope measurements, and subsurface surveys suggested precise orientation, cardinal alignment within fractions of a degree. Excavations exposed flat stone slabs beneath soil layers inconsistent with natural deposition. The claim was explosive. The world's largest pyramid, predating Egypt. Too big, too early, too public. Initial trenches revealed tunnel systems reinforced with dry stone walls and ceramic fragments sealed beneath compacted layers. Independent engineers measured electromagnetic anomalies and unusual acoustic properties inside the passages. Samples were taken. Volunteers documented everything. The media arrived before consensus could form. That was the turning point. Attention spiked. Pressure followed. Tolerance ended. International academic bodies moved quickly to condemn the project. Statements labeled it pseudoscience before full peer review concluded. Funding bodies withdrew. The Bosnian government reversed its support, citing reputational risk. Excavation permits were invalidated retroactively, a rare legal maneuver. Heavy equipment arrived not to expand the dig, but to backfill it. Trenches were refilled. Tunnel entrances were sealed with gravel and concrete under the justification of public safety. Not disproven, just buried. The official consequence was narrative isolation. Any researcher associated with the site found future grant applications flagged. Conferences declined submissions referencing Visoko. The debate ended not with data, but with stigma. One volunteer suffered serious injury when a tunnel collapsed during hurried sealing operations. Medical costs were not covered. He lost his job during recovery. His participation disappeared from official records. A body paid the price. Supporters argued suppression. Critics argued protection from misinformation. Both sides missed a key detail. Reburial is not required to refute a hypothesis. Disproof needs exposure, not concealment. If the structures were natural, full excavation would have ended the controversy permanently. Instead, the site was physically reset, soil returned, stone hidden, access restricted. The question survived. The evidence didn't. Today, the Visoko hills stand green and ordinary. Tourists pass without context. Beneath the surface, sealed tunnels remain mapped, but inaccessible. Whether pyramid or coincidence, the response followed a familiar pattern: rapid delegitimization, administrative pressure, and physical backfill. The method mattered more than the conclusion. Control restored, uncertainty contained. This was no longer about one site. By now, the pattern had crossed borders, ideologies, and academic factions. Different discoveries, same outcome. When anomalies refuse to resolve cleanly, the system defaults to erasure, not through fire or force, but through paperwork and soil. And from here on, escalation was inevitable. All excavation permits voided. Site physically backfilled under emergency safety order. Rehook 2. From here on, the pattern stops asking for permission. Story 7. The Cahokia Anomaly Mound, United States. By the 1960s, Cahokia was already recognized as North America's largest pre-Columbian city. Massive earthen mounds, planned plazas, a population once rivaling medieval London. What remained uncertain was how much lay beneath what had already been restored. During a geomagnetic survey near Monk's Mound, researchers detected a dense, symmetrical anomaly at depth, far more regular than surrounding fill. Too compact, too ordered, too deep. The survey data suggested a buried structure, straight boundaries, internal divisions, and a density signature inconsistent with layered earth alone. Field notes propose a timber or stone framework sealed early in the mound's construction. The anomaly was logged for future coring. That future never came. The National Park Service intervened, citing preservation ethics and the risk of destabilizing a UNESCO-caliber site. Caution replaced curiosity. Further investigation was denied. Instead, the mound underwent restoration, erosion control, slope smoothing, and soil replacement. Any chance to test the anomaly was eliminated by design. Updated maps generalized the interior as heterogeneous fill. The original magnetometry data was archived but never integrated into interpretive materials. Visitors were told what was known, not what was suspected. The gap widened. The cost was borne quietly by those early in their careers. A graduate student whose thesis centered on the anomaly was advised to change topics if he wanted to graduate on time. He complied. His original data sat unpublished for decades. He never returned to Cahokia research, eventually leaving academia altogether. He missed his chance to ask the question that brought him there. The mound stayed intact. So did the silence. Officially, this was preservation done right. Cahokia is fragile. Excavation can destroy what it seeks to understand. That argument holds weight. But preservation normally allows non-invasive testing to continue. Cores scans models. Here, even those avenues closed. The anomaly was treated not as a research lead, but as a liability, something better left undefined. Cahokia's story now emphasizes social complexity without technological surprise. No hidden chambers, no internal architecture, a safe narrative. Yet the magnetometry remains. Straight lines do not form by chance inside earthen mounds of that scale. Something was built, then intentionally sealed by its own creators, long before modern preservation sealed it again. A burial within a burial. By this point, the escalation was no longer subtle. Reburial had moved from emergency response to default strategy when a discovery threatened to complicate accepted models, especially in sites tied to national heritage. The answer was to lock the question behind stewardship language. The soil became policy, and policy became permanent. Federal preservation mandate invoked. Subsurface testing suspended indefinitely. Story 8. Stratum 7b resurfaces China. The second appearance was not supposed to happen. In 2013, during preliminary surveys for a hydroelectric dam in Shaanxi province, Chinese geologists documented stone objects embedded far below accepted Paleolithic layers. The site was remote, the work routine, until one notation froze the report mid-sentence. Cultural material present. Wrong depth, wrong layer. The tools were crude but deliberate. Flakes struck at controlled angles, consistent with early human manufacture. They were found beneath a dense sediment band dated hundreds of thousands of years older than any recognized habitation in the region. When stratigraphic labels were assigned, a junior geologist used a familiar placeholder from Soviet-era manuals. Stratum 7b, same label, same contradiction, different continent. Independent verification followed quickly. Optical dating, mineral analysis, all confirmed the layer's antiquity. The implication was severe. Either the dating models were catastrophically wrong, or tool-making hominins existed far earlier and far wider than current frameworks allowed. The report circulated internally for 6 days. Then it stopped. No revisions, no rebuttals, no publication. The dam project accelerated. What had been scheduled as a 3-year phase flood became an emergency infrastructure priority. Entire sections of the valley were cleared ahead of schedule. Excavation teams were ordered out. The exposed trench containing Stratum 7b was photographed once more, then backfilled. Weeks later, the reservoir filled. The site vanished beneath 30 meters of water. Preserved, inaccessible, irretrievable. The suppression carried a familiar signature. Oversight transferred from civilian geologists to a state security office specializing in strategic resources. The anomaly was reclassified as a geological irregularity. Requests for sample access were denied. Digital copies of the original stratigraphy were removed from shared servers. When a senior researcher referenced a layer at a closed conference, the transcript was never released. The word disappeared. The human cost followed the waterline. Villagers relocated for the dam lost ancestral land with little compensation. One local schoolteacher, who had assisted researchers by translating regional soil histories, was dismissed after speaking to a journalist. His family moved inland, his students scattered. The valley's memory drained away with the river. History submerged, lives displaced. This was the moment the pattern locked. Stratum 7b was no longer an isolated notation. It was a recurring fault line in the record, appearing independently, named identically and erased the same way. Ukraine, now China, different regimes. Same response. Coincidence collapsed. Cadence accelerated from here. Decisions shortened. Interventions hardened. The margin for academic delay vanished. Whatever Stratum 7b represented, error, anomaly, or forbidden possibility, It was now being managed as a risk, not to science, to stability, and stability demands silence. The reservoir's surface looks calm today. Satellite images show nothing unusual. Beneath the water, the layer remains exactly where it was found, sealed by concrete, policy, and depth. Archaeology often speaks of lost sites. This one was not lost. It was deliberately drowned. Findings classified as state secrets. Site flooded within 11 months of discovery. Story 9, the Antarctic Ice Tomb, Operation High Jump. The earliest record predates modern archaeology altogether. In 1946, during Operation High Jump, U.S. Navy aircraft conducted extensive aerial and radar surveys at Antarctica under the cover of training exercises. Officially, the mission tested cold weather logistics. Unofficially, it mapped what lay beneath the ice. One radar return stood out. Angular reflections beneath several hundred meters of ice in Queen Maud Land. Not mountains, not bedrock. Geometric voids. Flight logs describe subsurface irregularities inconsistent with glacial formations. At least one after-action report referenced layered structures beneath the ice shelf, detected by multiple passes using different frequencies. The data was flagged for review, then reclassified. The mission ended early. Ships withdrew weeks ahead of schedule. Public explanations cited weather. Internal correspondence cited something else. Further inquiry not advised. Decades later, fragments resurfaced. Declassified naval documents from the 1990s included a partial index of geological anomalies recorded during high jump. One entry carried an annotation added years after flight. Stratum 7b, anomalous return. The same term, the same implication. Stone where only ice should be. The breadcrumb closed the loop. No civilian expedition was ever sent to verify the site. Instead, the area was folded into restricted research zones under the Antarctic Treaty System. Satellite resolution over the coordinates was quietly downgraded in public releases. When ice-penetrating radar from later international surveys approached similar signatures, the data was labeled inconclusive and excluded from summaries. Access denied by consensus. The human cost was buried with the logs. One crewman assigned to the aerial survey died during evacuation after a crash landing on ice. His death was listed as a training accident. His family received no details. Another officer who questioned the early termination of the mission was reassigned to desk duty and retired within 2 years. He never spoke publicly about Antarctica again. The ice kept its secrets. Skeptics argue radar can deceive. Layers can echo. Angles can lie. That is true, but High Jump's anomaly was not singular. It was detected repeatedly, logged formally, and then sealed. And unlike natural errors, it triggered policy, classification, withdrawal, silence. Mistakes don't do that. By now, escalation was complete. Stratum 7b had appeared in soil, sediment, and now ice. Different eras, different technologies. Same administrative reaction. The cadence quickened, shorter reports, faster shutdowns, broader authority invoked. The pattern was no longer academic. Antarctica is often described as humanity's last neutral ground. No borders, no ownership. But neutrality ends where anomalies begin. Whatever lay beneath that ice, structure or misreading, was treated as something that could not be risked being known, not studied, not debated, contained. And there was one more site where the response would be even faster. Coordinates sealed under Antarctic Treaty. Access restricted for 75 years. Tory 10, the dig that was never announced, Iraq. There was no press release because there was no official dig. In 2003, following the invasion of Iraq, coalition forces secured not only oil fields and government buildings, but key archaeological zones. Most attention focused on the looting of museums. Less attention was paid to what happened outside public view. Temporary excavations conducted under military contracts, documented only in internal reports. One such site was open south of Mosul. Its name never appeared in academic records. It existed briefly, then it didn't. According to multiple contractor testimonies collected years later, the site was identified during ground stabilization for a forward operating base. Subsurface scans revealed rectilinear voids beneath an unregistered tell. A rapid excavation exposed stonework inconsistent with known Mesopotamian periods. Too deep, too uniform, sealed beneath flood deposits. Artifacts were photographed, tagged, and removed within 48 hours. Then the order changed. Cease and restore. The suppression was immediate and absolute. The area was declared a security risk. Armed perimeter enforced. Excavation halted. Everything exposed was reburied, compacted, and graded to match surrounding terrain. No carbon dating was authorized. No independent observers allowed. All digital records were transferred to military servers. Contractors signed non-disclosure agreements referencing national security classifications unrelated to cultural heritage. No citations, no oversight, no appeal. The consequence was erasure at scale. The site never entered Iraq's archaeological registry. Satellite images before and after showed disturbed ground. Then normalization. One civilian analyst who attempted to log the excavation internally was reassigned and later terminated. His personnel file shows a gap where the project name should be. He vanished from the paper trail. His wife later reported that he stopped discussing his work entirely. He missed his brother's wedding while deployed, then never spoke of Iraq again. Silence followed him home. What makes this site different is not what was found, but how fast the response was. No debate, no academic dispute, no gradual restriction. Every suppression marker seen before appeared at once. Military oversight, sealed data. Rapid reburial, legal silence. It was a pattern, compressed, a final test case. This was a hinge. If earlier sites could be explained away, preservation, caution, error, this one could not. It was never meant to be discovered by the public at all. It surfaced only because too many people were present at once, and the response revealed the priority clearly. Whatever lay beneath that soil was less dangerous buried than known. History was secondary. Control was not. Across 10 sites, the same decision repeated. Different cultures, different centuries, different explanations. One outcome. When the past threatens the present, the solution is not to destroy it. It is to put it back underground. All layers sealed, all records classified. The pattern complete.